Who would have thought that my son's wedding day would cause me so much pain and sadness? It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. But it turned out to be a day I was hurt and heartbroken by my son I loved so much. Before we continue with the story, comment where you are watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get more uplifting stories about women that have been betrayed and mistreated by family members, but still got back on their feet with a happy ending. Now back to our story. That morning, I woke with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. The house smelled faintly of lavender and polish from the night before, when I'd been too excited to sleep and decided to clean instead. My son's wedding day, the day I'd imagined since he was small enough to fit in my arms, had finally arrived. I wanted everything to be perfect. I'd even ironed my dress twice and packed a small tissue in my purse, knowing I'd cry when I saw him at the altar. I remember placing the envelope in the wedding card box, cream-colored, trimmed with lace and tiny pearls. Inside was a check for $26,000 and the deed to half of my house, signed and notarized. It was meant to be a surprise, a foundation for their future. I'd spent weeks preparing it, smiling at the thought of their faces when they found it later. To me, it wasn't just money. It was love, a gesture of trust, a way to say, "You'll always have a home." The ceremony passed in a blur of music and laughter. Sabrina looked radiant, though even then there was something cold behind her smile. Liam, my son, looked so proud, so sure he had found his forever. I clapped, cheered, and danced when everyone else did. For those few hours, I let myself believe that everything was as it should be. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. I stepped into the restroom after the toasts, my purse still slung over my shoulder. The sound of running water masked my footsteps, but not the words that followed. Sabrina's voice carried easily across the marble walls, light and sharp as a blade. "Once we get her tucked away in a nursing home, the house is ours. Liam says she's already slowing down. A year or two at most, and we'll remodel." For a moment I thought I'd misheard. Then her friend's laugh confirmed it. Low, mean, practiced. My son's name on her lips made my heart seize. Liam. Playboy. My only child. The one I raised alone after his father's passing. He had agreed. I stood frozen inside the stall, my hand clamped over my mouth to stop the sound that rose in my throat. They talked about me as if I were a problem to solve, a piece of property already accounted for. The check, the deed, all the years of sacrifice meant nothing. I was just an obstacle in their plans. When I finally stepped out, the mirror caught my face. Pale, expressionless, too composed. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I adjusted my shawl, straightened my posture, and walked back into the reception hall like nothing had happened. My lips smiled. My heart broke in silence. That night, while laughter and music filled the room, I quietly approached the gift table. My fingers found the envelope easily. Thick, familiar, mine. I slipped it into my purse, unnoticed. By midnight, the check was cancelled, the deed locked away. The tears never came. Only clarity. Something inside me shifted. A stillness, a cold kind of strength. I'd lost a son that day, but I'd found my resolve. The days that followed felt like walking through a play where everyone else knew their lines but I had forgotten mine. My phone buzzed constantly. Cheerful pings of affection that weren't affection at all. Sabrina's texts arrived like sugar-coated traps. "Thinking of you. We'd love to help with your bills. There's this beautiful senior community we should tour. Just for fun." Each message dripped with pretend concern. They weren't checking on me. They were checking my temperature, testing how close I was to surrendering my independence. I didn't reply. Instead, I read each one slowly, saved them, and noted the time. Every fake smile disguised as punctuation became a piece of evidence, though I wasn't sure yet what I was building toward. All I knew was that I needed to remember who they were showing me they truly were. On the fourth day, Liam called. His voice carried that light tone he used when he wanted something but didn't want to say it outright. "Mom, Sabrina's making her famous lasagna tonight," he said. "You should come by. We haven't had dinner together since the wedding." Almost said no. But curiosity outweighed comfort. I needed to look them in the eyes again, to see if guilt lived anywhere behind their smiles. Their apartment sat in one of those new developments. Thin walls, gray paint, too many mirrors. The air smelled of something burnt and overseasoned. Sabrina opened the door with that practiced grin, the one that never reached her eyes. "So glad you could make it," she said, stepping aside. The table was already set. Mismatched plates, a single flickering candle, and lasagna that looked overbaked around the edges. I took my seat while Liam poured wine, filling my glass to the brim as if generosity could erase deceit. "So," Sabrina began, slicing the lasagna with theatrical care, "Liam's been talking about how you've been spending a lot of time at home. We just want to make sure you're comfortable." "Comfortable?" I echoed, smiling faintly. "I manage." She laughed, that brittle, high sound again. "Well, that's good. But sometimes a little help makes life easier." Midway through the meal, she reached into her purse and slid a brochure across the table. Its glossy pages caught the candlelight. Pictures of beaming seniors playing cards, swimming, laughing. Silver Pines Retirement Village. "It could be fun," she said, tapping the cover. "You'd make friends your age, join classes. They even do movie nights." I lifted my gaze from the brochure to her face and let silence stretch until she started to fidget. Then I smiled and said softly, "Why don't you try it first and tell me how it is?" The fork in Liam's hand paused midair. The air thickened, brittle with surprise. Sabrina blinked rapidly, then forced a laugh. "Oh, I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," I said, still smiling, but it wasn't the smile of a fool anymore. After dinner, I declined dessert, hugged my son briefly, and left with my dignity intact and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the yellow light of the lamp Cliff had once used to read beside me. I opened a fresh notebook and drew 2 columns. On the left, I wrote what I gave. Money, time, forgiveness, years of quiet sacrifice. On the right, what I can still reclaim. My will, my peace, my freedom. I stared at those lists for a long while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. Then I underlined one word 3 times, peace. That night, I made myself a silent promise. I would no longer be their safety net. I would no longer soften my edges for people who sharpened theirs against me. I wasn't theirs to manage, to pity, or to inherit. I was mine, finally, and entirely mine. The next morning arrived gray and quiet, the kind of morning that doesn't invite conversation. I stood by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold, watching the steam fade into the air. It struck me how still the house felt, the same house where laughter once echoed through the halls, where Liam's tiny shoes once sat by the door. Now it felt like a museum of my mistakes, a place I'd kept alive out of love for people who had already moved on emotionally. But that day, I wasn't a mother or a widow. I was a woman taking her life back, one form at a time. I dressed simply. Navy coat, sensible shoes, hair pulled back tight, and drove to the county records office. The building was beige and unremarkable, filled with the hum of old fluorescent lights. The clerk behind the counter, a young woman with chipped blue polish on her nails, greeted me with a polite but distracted smile. "I'd like to verify property ownership," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. My voice surprised me, steady, clear, authoritative. She typed for a few seconds, the rhythmic clicking of her keyboard the only sound in the room. Then she glanced up at me and said, "It's still under your name, Ms. Monroe. Sole owner." Sole owner. I'd always known it, but hearing it spoken aloud felt like a key turning inside me. I ordered 3 certified copies. Tangible proof that I hadn't lost everything, that my life's work hadn't yet been stolen under the disguise of family. As the printer whirred, I stared at the county seal pressed into the paper. For the first time in a long time I felt grounded. From there I drove straight to Gerald's office. He'd been my lawyer for years, a kind man with silver hair and a dry sense of humor, the kind who treated legal documents like sacred texts. He looked up as I walked in, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Eleanor," he said warmly, You haven't been here since Cliff passed. Too long, I replied, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. I slid a folder toward him. My will, the deed, and a list of instructions I'd written the night before. I need to make some changes, I said. He read the first page, his brow lifting slightly. You want to remove Liam as primary heir? Yes, I said without hesitation. I want to establish a living trust instead. Everything stays under my control until I'm gone. No early inheritance. No shared ownership. Not anymore. He looked at me for a long moment, perhaps waiting for hesitation. There was none. He nodded slowly. You're certain about this? I've never been more certain, I said. And I don't want them notified. Let them keep dreaming for now. Gerald's pen scratched across the paper as he made notes. His face calm, professional, respectful. You're doing the right thing, he said quietly when we finished. When I walked out of his office, the weight in my chest had changed. It was still heavy but different, solid, steady, earned. I wasn't mourning anymore, I was moving. That afternoon I made one more call, this time to a realtor named Margaret Dean. She'd sold houses on my street before, discreetly, efficiently, without gossip. Her voice was bright but careful when she picked up. Mrs. Monroe, what can I do for you today? I'd like to list my house, I said simply. Quietly. No signs in the yard. No announcements. I don't want my son or his wife hearing about it before I'm ready. She paused, as though measuring the emotion beneath my words. Of course, she said softly. We'll handle it with discretion. Would you like to schedule a walkthrough? Yes, I said. Tomorrow morning. After hanging up, I sat in the empty living room for a long while. The light filtered through the curtains just as it always had, but the space felt different, lighter somehow. Maybe it was the knowledge that I was no longer waiting for permission to live my own life. For the first time in years, every decision I made belonged entirely to me. There was no guilt in it, no fear, no need to explain. Just quiet certainty. Felt like breathing again. 3 days passed before the invitation came. A cheerful text from Liam filled with emojis and exclamation marks. Brunch Sunday. Sabrina found this amazing new cafe downtown. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Sure. What time? I knew what it was. Performance. A chance for them to play the doting son and the kind daughter-in-law, to keep me softened and pliable while their plans unfolded behind the scenes. Still I went. Not because I wanted reconciliation, that illusion had already shattered, but because I wanted to see them clearly, without the fog of grief or denial. The cafe was one of those modern places where everything looked curated. White walls, gold-rimmed plates, and plants hanging from the ceiling like stage props. I spotted them by the window. Sabrina wore a pastel dress that made her look innocent, almost angelic. Liam waved when he saw me, that boyish grin still capable of breaking my heart. Mom, you look wonderful, he said as I sat down. His eyes avoided mine for more than a few seconds. Guilt has a way of showing itself in the smallest gestures. Sabrina reached for my hand across the table. Her voice warm but rehearsed. I was just telling Liam how excited we are about the future. You've built such a beautiful home, Eleanor. We can't wait to make it our own. Her words landed like tiny daggers coated in honey. I kept my expression neutral, sipping the weak coffee the waiter had just set down. Oh, I asked, feigning mild curiosity. She brightened instantly, mistaking my calm for compliance. Oh yes, when we move in next year, I'm planning to redo the kitchen. Open it up, make it modern. I've already found the perfect backsplash. I could feel the heat rise behind my eyes, not from anger, but from the sheer absurdity of it. When we move in next year. My hands rested on my lap beneath the table, fingers interlaced so I wouldn't betray the small tremor of disbelief. Liam smiled at her proudly, as if the home I'd spent decades building had already changed ownership in his mind. I nodded slowly, the kind of nod one gives when humoring a child's fantasy. Sounds ambitious, I said softly. The waiter returned with our plates. Overpriced waffles topped with berries and cream. Sabrina talked the entire time, her voice light and certain, describing renovation plans, paint colors and new furniture. I ate slowly, tasting none of it, my mind elsewhere. It wasn't what they said that hurt most. It was what they assumed, that I was too old, too trusting, too irrelevant to stop them. When the check came, Sabrina reached for it with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Let me use Mom's card," she said, flashing me that bright, artificial smile. I reached into my purse, laid 2 20s on the table and said, "No need. I prefer cash. Less chance of leaving paper trails." Her smile faltered, and for a moment I saw it, that flash of irritation beneath her polished mask. Liam's eyes flickered between us, confusion and tension crossing his face. I excused myself soon after, citing errands, and left before they could recover the performance. Outside the air felt different, cleaner somehow. I walked slowly to my car, letting the city noise drown out the hollow echo of their laughter behind me. By evening I was back home. I brewed tea, sat at my kitchen table, and spread the final documents before me. The sale papers lay there, waiting for my signature, clean white sheets that symbolized something far greater than a transaction. My pen moved slowly but deliberately, each stroke of ink closing one chapter and opening another. My home, the one my husband and I had built nail by nail, paycheck by paycheck, was no longer theirs to dream about. It was my liberation. Later that night, as the moonlight spilled across the garden, I stepped out onto the patio for air. The cicadas were singing, and the wind carried faint voices from the neighboring house. My sliding door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I caught their voices, muffled, heated. "She's manipulating you," Sabrina hissed. "That house is ours. You said she gave it to us." My breath caught. Liam's reply was quieter, strained. "She hasn't done anything yet. Just give it time." "No," Sabrina snapped, her voice sharp enough to pierce the night. "She's stalling. She's playing you, and you're letting her." I didn't move. I simply listened, my heart steady, my expression unreadable in the dark. They still thought they were winning, still thought I was the gullible old woman who didn't know how to fight back. But I had already taken everything back. I closed the sliding door gently, locking it this time. Then I stood for a moment, letting the silence settle around me like armor. Their game was still in motion, but I was no longer their piece to move. I was done being part of their story. From now on, I would be the one writing mine. When I walked back into Gerald's office, the morning sun slanted through the blinds, cutting stripes of gold across the dark wood of his desk. He looked up from a pile of folders, his brow furrowed, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. He didn't even bother with pleasantries this time. "Eleanor," he said, his tone measured but serious. "You should know, your daughter-in-law's been calling." Blink. "Calling? About what?" He exhaled and leaned back in his chair. "She's been trying to sound helpful. Claimed she's worried about you. Asked whether you had a current power of attorney on file. Then she mentioned, casually of course, that you've been feeling forgetful." The word landed like a slap. Forgetful. It wasn't just an insult. It was a weapon. I understood the tactic instantly. She was building a story, one she could twist into paperwork later. Gerald continued, "She's clever." She framed it as concern, but what she's doing is laying the groundwork for a competency claim. She wants to prove you're incapable of handling your own affairs. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my expression still. "Then let's make sure she never gets the chance." He nodded, already pulling out forms from a thick binder. "We'll file a voluntary declaration affirming your full mental and legal capacity. I'll have it notarized, witnessed, and time-stamped. That way, if she ever tries to challenge it, it's on record that you acted willingly and soundly today." I watched as he wrote my name on the top line, Eleanor Monroe, in neat, careful script. It looked like the signature of someone certain of who she was. I signed where he pointed, my hand steady, deliberate. Every page carried the weight of defiance. Gerald placed each completed sheet into a manila folder, organizing them with methodical precision. When we were finished, he pressed the folder closed and gave me a small, proud smile. "You're covered," he said. "And Eleanor, she's more transparent than she thinks. Last week, she ran a title search." My eyebrows lifted. "On the house?" He nodded. "Wanted to see if her name had appeared on the deed yet." A slow, humorless smile tugged at my lips. "She really thought she'd find it there." "She did," Gerald said dryly. "But all she found was yours." As I left his office, a light rain had started to fall. Thin, cleansing, persistent. I didn't bother with an umbrella. The cool drops against my skin felt like a quiet baptism, washing away the last traces of hesitation. I wasn't fighting them anymore. I was simply outpacing them. That afternoon I began packing. It was strange how peaceful it felt. Each box I sealed wasn't an ending. It was a boundary. I labeled them one by one in neat handwriting. Kitchen essentials. Winter clothes. Personal documents. Each stroke of the marker felt like reclaiming something I'd lost. The house was quieter than usual, but it didn't feel lonely. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was honest. I moved slowly, methodically, folding the past into cardboard squares. Every picture frame, every book, every dish carried a memory, but none of it hurt anymore. I wasn't erasing a life. I was preserving it for the one person who had earned it, me. By evening, the guest room was filled with stacked boxes and neatly taped containers. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my knees aching, but my spirits strangely light. The paperwork for my new lease rested on the nightstand, signed under my maiden name, Eleanor Brooks. I had chosen it deliberately. That name belonged to the girl I used to be, the one who dreamed without permission, the one who wasn't defined by anyone else's expectations. The cottage was small. 2 bedrooms, a white fence, a maple tree in front. I'd already had the utilities transferred, the mail redirected to a new P.O. box. Everything was in motion, quietly, efficiently, invisibly. I wasn't running away. I wasn't hiding. I was stepping out of their story and back into my own. That night, before turning off the light, I stood in the doorway of the living room, the place that had held so much. Holidays, laughter, betrayal. I didn't cry. I just whispered softly to the air. "It's time." And for the first time in a long while I believed it. The evening I invited them to dinner, the sky was already the color of cooling ashes, soft gray and gold fading into the horizon. I spent the day preparing the meal, not out of sentiment but out of precision. Everything was deliberate. The table set neatly, the candles lit, the wine decanted hours earlier. I wanted no room for chaos. Not in the house, not in my voice, not in my heart. When Liam and Sabrina arrived, they wore matching smiles, the kind people put on when they think they've won. Sabrina's perfume reached me before her words did. Something floral, expensive and suffocating. Liam hugged me too tightly, the way guilty people do when they're pretending nothing's wrong. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble, Mom," he said, glancing at the roast on the table. "Oh, I wanted to," I replied softly, pulling out a chair for him. It felt like the right night for closure. Sabrina tilted her head. "Closure? You'll see," I said, with a smile so polite it unsettled her. Dinner unfolded like a performance. Forced laughter, hollow compliments, an air thick with unspoken tension. Sabrina complimented the food with exaggerated sweetness, tapping her manicured nails against her wineglass. Liam avoided my eyes, laughing at all the wrong moments. It was strange, sitting across from them, knowing they still believed I was theirs to manipulate, that I'd quietly hand over everything I'd worked for out of love or weakness or both. When dessert came, a simple apple tart, I cut 3 equal slices, served them, and let silence hang for just long enough to make them shift in their seats. Then I stood, walked to the cabinet, and retrieved the envelope I'd prepared. "This is for you," I said, placing it gently in front of Sabrina. She blinked, clearly expecting a check, perhaps even a peace offering. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, feigning surprise. "You didn't have to." I gestured for her to open it. She slid a manicured finger beneath the seal, unfolded the single card inside, and froze. Her expression changed. Confusion first, then insult. The card held only 5 words, written in black ink. Some lessons come the hard way. Her eyes shot up. "What is this supposed to mean?" she demanded, her tone losing its syrupy smoothness. Liam frowned, his confusion already curdling into panic. "Mom." I looked at them both and said quietly, "It means I heard everything. The laughter in the restroom, the plans to send me away, the talk of taking my home once I was gone. Took back the check. I reclaimed the deed. And I made sure every door you thought you'd walk through has been locked behind you." The silence that followed was heavy, stunned, almost holy. Sabrina's lips parted, searching for a defense that wouldn't come. Liam's face crumpled in disbelief. "You don't understand." "No," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I understand perfectly. You tried to build your future by burying mine." Neither of them spoke after that. When they left, it wasn't with anger. Not yet. But with the brittle quiet of people realizing the game had turned. A few nights later, that quiet broke. They arrived without warning. Fists pounding the door, voices raised. I opened it just enough to meet their eyes. "You sold it!" Sabrina screamed, her voice sharp and desperate. "Yes," I said simply. "The utilities end next week." She went pale, trembling with fury. "You can't do this to us." "I already did." Liam's voice cracked as he tried to reason, to soften me again. "Mom, we didn't mean it." "We were." "You did mean it," I said, holding his gaze. "You just didn't think I'd act." And then I closed the door. Slowly, calmly, finally. Weeks later, word reached me through an old bridge partner. Liam and Sabrina were living in her parents' garage, cold, broke, and bitter. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply poured another cup of tea and sat by the window of my new cottage, watching autumn leaves scatter across the yard. The world was quiet again, peaceful. They called it betrayal, called it boundaries. As I watched the trees shed what no longer served them, I realized I'd done the same. Peace, I thought, isn't a gift people hand you when they're ready. It's the life you reclaim when you finally stop asking for permission to live it. And as the wind brushed through the golden leaves, I felt lighter than I ever had. Not because I'd won, but because I was finally free.